Pause. So perfect. So we'll get started. So thank you all for joining today. I'm Claire Rason, founder and director of Client Talk. For those of you who have been to my events before, you will know that I'm a big believer in diverse thinking. And so I always try and get different voices and perspectives into the room. So I'm really delighted with my panel today because I think it's going to be a fantastic session. I'm going to let them introduce themselves so you can put a name and a face together when we start the discussion. And I'm going to start with Gareth, if I may. Gareth, if you could just introduce yourself.
Thanks, Claire. My name is Gareth Hughes. I am the Director of Strategy at Reed Smith. I think we are a global international firm focused on benefiting our, you know what we are. We're in 27 countries and we are big, slow and probably the opposite of all the other panelists that we're about to talk to.
Thanks, Gareth. And next I'm going to go over to Mark.
Morning, I'm Mark Duffel. I've never ever been considered big because I'm only about 5'6". So Gareth's already got an advantage on me. I am a consultant in PR and communications. I've worked in the legal sector for quite a long time, formerly with Irwin Mitchell for 10 years. So I had some experience of big firms then and also worked for some FTSE 100s. But now working with smaller businesses and seeing the difference. And it's really interesting.
Thanks, Mark. Jamie, if we can go to you next.
Sure. Morning, everybody. I'm Jamie Murray. I'm the project manager and co-owner of Lawbox Design. Lawbox Design is a legal design agency. We help businesses to better understand and manage their legal risk. I suppose we've got a similar sort of model to that of Gunnar Cook, just much smaller. And I'll let Laura explain what Gunnar Cook do in a bit. But our model sort of allows us a bit more flexibility to merge design thinking principles with the practice of law. I'm personally not a lawyer. I'm a project manager, so I don't have any sort of legal hang-ups, if you want to call them those. I get granted a little bit of artistic license, and I get to ask the question why an awful lot, which can wind my colleagues up somewhat, but it's an important question, as we'll come on to later on, I'm sure, in the conversation.
Thanks, Jamie. So next I'm going to ask Laura to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Laura Fisher. I'm the marketing director at Gunnar Cook. As Jamie said, we're what you call a challenger law firm. So we're about 250 partners operating across the country. Every partner joins us with a client following and a business plan. And our role is to put the entire infrastructure around them that enables them to deliver that business plan. So ranging from finance, post, back office services through to business development and how they develop commercially, and also a whole lot about their personal well-being and personal effectiveness. We operate a fee share model. So at a basic level, the lawyer retains 70% of the fees they generate. They pay 30% to the centre for us to develop all of the infrastructure around them.
Thanks, Laura. Looking forward to hearing from you later. And then finally, but not least, Emma.
Yeah, morning, everyone. My name's Emma McCann. I'm head of strategy at a startup which is called Surmise. So I was a lawyer for about 11 years, and I was just really interested in kind of how the legal landscape was changing, and I could see that legal tech was very much at that intersection between creativity and law, which was appealing. So I joined a great legal tech startup called Flex a few years ago before joining Surmise last year. And Surmise is a contract automation platform which basically helps people to understand, review and manage contracts.
Thank you. So we're going to hear from everyone later. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to the session today. So Client Talk ran an event at the back end of 2020 looking at business development, and there was a conversation that ensued about firms that were kind of sitting on their hands in 2020 waiting for things to get back to normal, and firms that were kind of using 2020 as an opportunity to pivot. And that led me to conduct a poll of my network to find out what firms people thought were being innovative. And it surprised me because all of the names that came back were smaller challenger firms, which led me to think, well, perhaps it's the smaller firms that have got the upper hand when it comes to innovation. Now, I've been at large firms and I've been at small firms, and I can see advantages and disadvantages to both. So from the quick decision making and the ability to pivot quickly in a small firm to the bigger budgets and the stronger branding of a bigger firm, which enables some really exciting collaborations with clients. So what I wanted to do was explore those themes today. And as you have already heard, we've got representatives of big firms, small firms, some in between, and legal tech as well.
Keep going with your writing.
Before we start, I just want to mention 3 things. So the first thing is, I mentioned diverse thinking already, and it's something I'm passionate about. And what that means is there are different perspectives in the room. Hopefully that will lead to some debate, and it might also lead to people having views that are different from your own. So what I want you to do is to challenge yourself if people are thinking differently from yourselves, and ask yourselves why it is that you don't agree, what that might say about you and your thoughts. Feel free to challenge in the chat. We will have time for questions as we go through or at the end, so feel free to participate. And I know that not everyone online is from the legal sector. I know the panel is legal sector heavy, but if you're from a different sector and it resonates or it doesn't resonate, please do throw some thoughts in the chat. And the final thing I want to say is those that came to my last event will know that I gave away some gift boxes at the beginning tied into the theme. I haven't done that today because I'm going to do something slightly different. And I have some copies of my favourite book, which is on diverse thinking. And these 2 copies are going to go to the first 2 people who recognise, and I'm going to tell Gareth to talk in a second so you can see. He has 3 maps behind him. The first person who can correctly identify in the chat the 3 maps that are behind Gareth will get a copy of the book.
Okay, and they came with the frames, so I don't actually know what cities they are. No, I'm joking. Sorry.
So the first 3 people that that know or can recognise those 3 cities behind Gareth will get a copy of the book. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Mark. So one of the things that has changed in 2020 is the PR landscape. So I'm going to pass over to Mark just to give a brief introduction to the topic today.
Thanks, Claire. First challenge I've got is to have this done by 9:15, so you can all shout at me if I go beyond 9:15. Okay, 3 quick points, because I'm in PR. I have 3 quick points. We always have 3s in PR. So how has PR changed in 2020? Well, everything changed in 2020. If you'd have told us this time last year that we'd have been through the last 12 months that we had been, I don't think any of us, being honest, would have believed you. But we've been through it. We've all survived it, and I think the firms that adapt, the firms that do things differently, are those that are really now coming through it in a much stronger position. I speak obviously to people in the legal sector a lot, but also to people outside. My background was in the energy sector, in the retail sector, before I joined the legal sector about 11 years ago. And it's really interesting. Some people just have that view that this is life now and they're just going to get on with it. And you know, the landscape has changed and we've got to change, and they're really excited about it. That's where I am. But you do speak to people in the legal sector who are just waiting for it to get back to normal. And I think that's a really, really dangerous thing for anybody to think. It isn't going to happen. I was reading today, big firm Aviva have shut one of their 2 offices in York, not because they're getting rid of jobs, but just because everybody's working from home. You ring a call centre now, people are working from home. The landscape has changed completely. It's inconceivable that everything will go back to how it was this time last year. So there's no point thinking the same way. We have, as Claire's called it, got to rip up the rule book and start again. One of the big things I've noticed emerging in the last 12 months has been the rise of authenticity. We live in a post-truth world. Trump, the current government and other things have challenged the way we actually trust expert sources, have challenged the way we take official information. And that's made for brands authenticity, its own people. People in, you know, I know you're not allowed to call it sales in the legal sector, but it's what it is. People buy people. And that's become more and more important. It was already a rising trend, but it's become so much more important. People expect to see authentic people telling authentic stories. We've all got used to MPs doing the cut and paste tweet or the cut and paste post. People see through that now. So brands have got to respond to that. You can't just sit back and expect the world to be the same. You can't just post loads of stuff, you know, corporate branded on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and expect the same engagement. It just won't happen. That's changed. So that means you've got to adapt. And I suppose the question is, who's better placed to do that? Bigger firms or smaller firms? I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that. I think it depends on the business. However, the reality is being agile is always easier if you're a smaller firm. You have fewer people to involve. Gareth said they're big and slow. I used to work for Irwin Mitchell, used to work for Centrica, used to work for Morrison's. Getting things done in that organisation just meant you had to involve more people. More people means more decisions, more meetings, God, and all of that. In a smaller business, fewer people involved, you can move faster, unless the larger organisation makes itself agile and slims down the process. And I think, you know, the other thing I would say there is people talk about change. And in the legal sector, I think people sometimes think that innovation means you've got to invent the next iPhone. You don't. Innovation can just mean changing tiny changes. I'm a massive motorsport fan. My son races, and in motorsport, it's the tiniest differences that will get you the gains. The tiniest tweak of something will get you a tenth of a second, but a tenth of a second is all you're chasing. And for businesses, it's a really good analogy. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every day. You just have to make small improvements over the course of a year. People look at things as where will we be in a week. Think about it as where we'll be at the end of this year. And then think of the story you'll tell at the end of the year, and you'll realize how far you've come. If you only judge things in a couple of weeks, you'll never feel like you're getting anywhere. But if you view it over a longer period, as they do in motorsport, you'll realize how far you've come. And I've got a minute. The other thing I will say is, the one thing I've noticed a lot in the legal sector is lawyers and some of the BD people that work with them have a tendency to presume that what they're selling is what people want. How do you know? If somebody comes to my door and says, can I, and this is, I know people will be challenged by the analogy, but it's the same principle. Somebody comes to my door and says, I've got some great windows. I'm going to go, I don't need windows. If they come and tell me why there's something wrong with my windows or why I need these windows, then I might be interested. Law firms a lot of the time go out selling windows without checking whether anybody actually needs windows. And that's what needs to change. You need to identify what your clients need and build the product around it, not presume that the product is what everybody wants and just go out and sell that. And I think it was Jamie that alluded to this and stole my finishing point. For all of us who've got kids, you'll know the most important, the most irritating, but also the most important question on the planet is why. That's how kids learn. And that's how we can all learn. That's the question in our industry, especially if you're working in marketing or PR and things, and you're strategically advising a business. That's the biggest and most powerful question you can ask anybody. And that's the thing I would challenge everybody to do in their day-to-day lives. Always be asking why. You know, why are we doing that? Why would they buy it? And crucially, why aren't we? Why, you know, when people say it wouldn't work, why? That's, to me, how you become agile. That's how you change things. That's how you rip up the rule book. That's how, with that summary, you just go over the 9:15.
Thanks.
Sorry about
that. That's all right, Mark. I think I started you late, so I'm not keeping to time either. And having worked with Mark, he does ask why a lot. So we're going to start off the panel session with Gareth. The first question I'm going to ask Gareth is, do you think that big firms are at a disadvantage?
I would say yes, in general. I think we are. And I think for the points that Mark has made correctly, you know, everyone accepts the adaptability point is so important. And, you know, an example that we had recently when we went into our first lockdown, we decided to ask all of our fee earners globally to put the availability into a tool or a spreadsheet essentially every single day, so we knew who was available and what they were doing. We thought that was a really good piece of business management, and I'm sure you could guess how many days it took. We're still waiting. We haven't got everyone to do it yet. So, you know, the ability to pivot and respond and react, you know, is a real challenge for us and for other large firms. I believe I've worked in a couple of them, and I think that puts us at a great disadvantage. However, there's always, you know, flip sides. You know, on the positive side, we've spent a long time being really worried about these challenger firms and the big four entrants and how Other businesses can be more adaptable and more reactive to client needs because they don't need to have a central brand that doesn't change and is really consistent. And we've struggled with that for some time. And I think what this last year has taught us is that our clients have always demanded that value and adaptability, and we haven't really looked at ourselves in that way. We spend a lot of money, as other big firms do, on consultants, on technology platforms, on acquiring startups. And as I'm sure you can guess, some of it isn't incredibly aligned to our central strategy. Some of it is wasteful. And that is a byproduct of an industry with a high profit margin. But I think what you'll see in the coming months as people start to, release their annual statements and talk about their PEP for the year is that nearly every single large firm, at least, and I believe a lot of the smaller firms, will have increased their profit margin last year. And that is obviously by looking internally, reducing costs, being more efficient. And even when you think about, the travel spend of a typical Magic Circle partner going around the world and 15 stops in 5-star hotel, that money can be put to some really good effect internally. And I think that's what we're starting to see and do. So I think that gives us a slight advantage, because I think over the next few years, we will be more considered with our investment and hopefully more aligned to our long-term strategy and what our clients need.
And what do you think big firms are doing to innovate? You mentioned a few things there in terms of buying some of the smaller firms and tacking them on. Do you think that's going to be what we're going to see with bigger firms, or do you think that they're going to look at their models and work out ways that they can be more innovative?
Yeah, I mean, it's a quick way to grow. It's a great way to get some new talent and fresh thinking into a business, and I've seen that work to really good effect. What we've done personally, we've formed some really strong partnerships, with Elevate Services being one of them, and we're working on something where we have them teaching us about legal service delivery, legal engineering, hosting lots of our complex high volume matters as well. And I think that partnership model might be really interesting, because there's lots of ASLPs, lots of challenger firms who have some really good thinking and really good case studies on how they've impacted legal delivery that I think big firms are interested in. But there's always been some hesitancy to do that and have those close alignments. Lots of talk about dilution of brand. And when you look at Aquitas, what you'll see is all of those challenger firms and ASLPs have much stronger brands than the big firms believe they have. And pretty believable data too, and you can understand why. So I think for me, that's something I'm more prepared to do in the future, and will be advising the firm to do so.
And traditional firms are always in the firing line, and I'm sure we're going to hear that from Laura and from Jamie in a second. Do you think that's fair? Do you think you can be big and non-traditional?
Yes, it's a tough thing. There are firms that do that really well, but when you stray from the centre point too far, the whole point in that global model, that global international full service model, is that it serves the majority of client needs. But there's always going to be fringe cases which can be really important to clients that we are and other firms are not ready to react to and respond to well. And we see that a lot. We see GCs that we've worked with for 10 plus years, 20 years come to us and say, we've got this really specific problem. And it sounds super simple, especially the stuff that's going on with international trade and supply chain at the moment is really interesting. Stuff that we haven't been really doing for a long time, because it's typically relatively low value work in the spectrum. But right now, it's really important to clients. You would have thought that every big firm would have seen it coming and been ready to move and get ready for it. January the 1st, I saw an email saying, crap, we need to be ready to do this stuff. And we haven't, not every firm has been able to pivot and get ready to do that quickly enough. So I think lots of the big firms talk about being perfect for the clients, having relationships with clients, and actually being broader, and ready to go outside of their comfort zone, maybe what clients need a little bit more.
And in terms of what clients need, it's going to be my last question before I move over to Jamie, because I know client need is something that's one of the things that Jamie talks about a lot. Do clients push you to say, well, we need you to be more innovative, we need you to be less traditional? Yeah,
I mean, I think we've been through a couple of cycles on that. So, we were, I'd say 7 to 8 years ago, all we heard about was the term innovation. And then we had all internal conversation. What is innovation? Should we set up innovation hubs, hire innovation managers, be more innovative, have innovation as one of our core values? We've done all of those things. But for me, it always comes down to, what are the real drivers? Why are our clients asking us to be innovative? If behind innovation is efficiency and cost saving, then it's a different thing. If they want us to be innovative in terms of our delivery to keep them interested and excited in working with us, that's again a different thing. And personally, I'm sure others are much more kind of versed in this. I've never really got to the bottom of what our clients want with innovation, because there's lots of different needs, and I may come back and say there's lots of different needs within that term that we haven't really got to.
Okay, thanks. Alan, thank you for your comment earlier. Much harder to turn a large ship. If people have got thoughts as we're going through, please feel free to put them in the chat there. We'll pick them up when we can. So if you've got questions for any of our panelists, please use the chat. And nobody has yet identified the 3 maps behind Gareth, so you've had a good opportunity there. So if anyone recognises the 3 maps, remember there is a prize. So I am now going to move on. So we've spoken to Reed Smith, which is obviously a huge global firm, and we're now going to go to the other end of the spectrum, to a smaller firm, but a small firm that has really made waves in 2020. Mark was talking about authenticity, and that's something that Lawbox have been doing a lot this year in terms of using social media and being authentic. So I'm going to start, Jamie, just by asking, what advantages do you have that mean that you can challenge the traditional approach?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest advantages that we've got isn't just associated with the size of the business. I think it's also connected with the model that we try and adopt as well, and the alternative sort of structure and the lack of a big hierarchy. I think that makes a big difference. But overriding all of it, I think that the big advantage is time. So we certainly get a lot more time to be able to spend getting to understand our businesses that we work with, what makes them tick, what their challenges are. I know, Claire, you talk an awful lot about this, but really empathising with our customers and understanding what their problems are, putting ourselves in their shoes. To really get to the root cause of the problems, and all of that for us, because of the size of us, I suppose we can afford to do a lot of that off the clock. In our view, we term that as business development. It's growing and understanding the partners that we're working with. I think another advantage is the fact that we don't have so many mouths to feed. So we don't have a big panel of shareholders or partners that are driving us to sort of try and achieve an ever expanding profit margin, and as a result of that, we can afford to be a bit more creative, I think, and we can start to question the way that we do things more, explore different ventures and opportunities that might come our way through the partnerships that we're developing. We can take more calculated risks, which might be a strange thing to hear from a law firm, and I think lots of traditionalists might sort of scream and yelp at that idea. But I think you can certainly start to look to broaden your horizons when you consider different alternative ways of doing things. We can test and iterate things, and I'm probably touching on a few bits of terminology from legal design here, but we have the time again to be able to do that and to adapt. I think Gareth touched on it earlier, but to adapt quicker and behave more like our target customers, who are dynamic and bold and perhaps a little bit brave in what they're doing. We can afford the time to react with them. And I think one of the key things that I don't think anybody's mentioned yet is the fact that we don't have to accept everybody's business, that we can be quite niche, and we can we don't have to appeal to everybody, and not everybody is going to want our type of service, and that's fine, because we're comfortable with that fact. So I think that's a sort of nice overall summary of what makes us a bit different to the traditional big firms.
Thanks, Jamie. You've mentioned a few things there which are a design thinking approach, and you are a legal design firm. legal design has been, you know, one of the successes, I think, of 2020, and it's created a huge buzz. You know, is it just a buzzword?
It's a good question. It's one that gets asked an awful lot, actually. And you know, when we first, I suppose, stumbled across the term, we perhaps thought the same thing. You know, this is just another industry buzzword that will soon sort of fizzle out over time. I think when you start to dig a bit deeper, though, you realise that by its very nature, it's a process of continuous improvement. I think it helps us to answer that question that we mentioned earlier on, why. You know, it's a standard process that we can use to answer that question, and that's a question that really we should never stop asking ourselves. I think so many other sectors and industries and products and services have benefited from the application of design thinking processes to their for their benefit, and they've done that because it works. You know, it's been tested over time, and I don't think the legal sector should be any different to that. I think, yeah, I mean, in my opinion, it's definitely not a buzzword. I think it's certainly a shift in mindset that people need to try and adopt. And I think those that do think that it's a buzzword and you know, don't want to explore its true meaning and the principles that sit behind it, I think could quite easily get left behind if they're not careful.
And some of those principles are ones, in fact, kind of go back to what Mark was saying at the beginning. So, you know, the continuous improvement, empathizing with your clients. And I know that one of the things which is tied to legal design, but I know for Lawbox goes beyond that, is you want to move law from a need to a want. So I wonder if you can explain a bit more about that.
Sure. You know, this is, I suppose, our ambitious sort of overarching aim, and it's certainly not something that we think we can achieve overnight. It's going to take, you know, several years for us to get there. We may never get there, but it's certainly something that we strive for. It's you know, I suppose it's the end game that we're looking to achieve. It's our final destination. It's the cathedral that we're trying to build as Lawbox, and you know we've seen that, you know, that can take time, and it's as much about the process and getting there than, you know, the actual end product itself. I think the reason that it's so difficult is because it involves and long time services has often been viewed as a distressed purchase. It's something that you often do or engage with when you have no other option, and you know, there's very little sort of proactive work that's done when it comes to legal services in general, which I think is a real shame, because I think we're missing out on huge opportunities. But the reason for that is that, you know, the client is often on a back foot, and as a result of that, you know, solicitors can often take advantage of them being on a back foot and can very easily fall into the trap of just providing a solution to the problem that they've been presented with, and nothing else. There's no added value. There's no thought of how do we how does the customer actually feel when they come and engage with our service. And I think that again is dangerous ground to be treading on, certainly, you know, in more recent times. I think the solution that we're trying to employ with Lawbox is, and we call it legal user experience, LUX, and it's really about, you know, trying to understand better how we engage with our customers and how they feel when we are delivering that service to them, and where can we add value in other areas. So, you know, from my own experience, I know how daunting it can be to contact a solicitor for the first time. You know, it's sometimes quite a scary experience. Making customers feel a little bit more at ease when they first engage with your services is a key point. We touched on it earlier, but empathizing with their situation, and that doesn't just mean, you know, saying, you know, I understand where you're coming from. It's really getting to the root cause. It's understanding their business, what makes them tick, what problems might they be experiencing elsewhere in their business, you know, other things that we can look to try and improve on it, sort of empowering our clients and really giving them the tools to be able to service their own needs and sharing our knowledge with them. Let's not just view ourselves as you know, an ivory tower where people come and grab the service they need and walk away and then come back again in a few months' time. That it shouldn't be like that. So I think, you know, that there are other areas. There are identifying opportunities to help speed up transactions for our clients, to help them close deals quicker, to improve their sales, their revenue. You know, these are all things that they're across the board. There are loads of opportunities to be able to try and do that. And I think if we walk through that path with our eyes closed, then, you know, we're never going to get there. So I think it's being aware of those things, and, you know, that's I'm sure there are plenty more opportunities to try and make legal services a want rather than just a need. And, you know, we're going to try and keep our eyes open as we explore those.
Thank you. And if anyone's got any thoughts on that, again, please use the chat. We will be picking that up. I've got one person who is guessing on the maps in the private chat, so please keep playing that game as well as we're going through. I'm going to move now to Laura, and Gunner Cook sit in the middle of the two firms that we've spoken about, really. And what's particularly interesting is that Laura has been with Gunner Cook for many years now, so she's seen the growth trajectory. So Laura, I'm just going to start off with a really broad question, which is what are your thoughts on what we've heard so far this morning?
It's been interesting actually to hear both sides. I think when I was thinking about the initial topic that you reached out with today, and about how firms have adapted to the past 12 months, it's interesting because Gunner Cook was set up as a remote working model. So to some extent, the last 12 months, we've not had to adapt. It's been kind of business as usual within the realms of the craziness of the world around us. But two of the biggest kind of bits of feedback and comments that we used to get on the model were around, well, how can you go out and say that you deliver really high quality legal services in a remote working model? And I think the last 12 months have proved that you can do that, because everybody's had to do that. And the second bit is around teamwork. So we often used to get commented, how can you build teams? Is everybody working in silos, in one-man bands, working from home, had this stigma? And again, that's gone now. So I suppose what I've been kind of thinking whilst I've been hearing comments from the others is, well, you know, we're still ahead of the game at this moment in time, because this has been our working practice. This is how we've built our business. But that, you know, we've got a finite window of time before firms that have been adapting, and firms like Garrett's, which have got, you know, much deeper pockets than ours. This isn't a different way of working. This isn't a challenging way of working anymore. This just becomes how people work and how people deliver. So there's advantages to it, because it's kind of proven that our model can work. You can deliver high quality legal services, you can build teams, and you can do it in exactly the same way. You know, it's been a real leveler, because everybody's to some extent had the same tools available. You know, everyone's had to jump on a Zoom call this year and speak to their clients. Everybody's been able to do, you know, no matter how big your marketing budget's been, essentially we've all had the same tools available to market, and it's become much more about, you know, how do you connect with people personally. So I think where we go from here is going to be interesting, because from an innovation perspective, some of the pillars of our model that you would have considered more innovative, I guess, won't be innovative anymore. They'll just be how people work.
Yeah, and interesting. And going back to that innovation point and what is innovation, which we've heard a couple of times today. And Mark Howe, thank you. No gate crashers are welcome, so that's fine. You know, and if anyone else wants to put some thoughts in the chat now about, you know, what do they think is innovation? We'll be hearing from Emma in a minute, and she's obviously legal tech. Is innovation tech, or is it something else? Now, you mentioned there that, you know, other firms are going to be biting at your heels because, you know, models of working have changed everywhere. Which firms are you most concerned about, or are you admiring most?
I wouldn't say that there's a firm in particular that we're really concerned about. I think it is just as I've said, that, you know, we recognise that we've got to continue to capitalise on the lessons we've learnt, because other firms are going to be moving into this space. And I think, you know, one of the things that we've done really well and continue to focus on is around the culture that we've built. So, you know, in a remote working business, you have to have a really strong culture, because otherwise everybody is a remote worker, everybody is a silo at home. And so from the outset, and from when we were a startup and we were, you know, very, very small, we used to focus an awful lot on how we connect people and engage people on a very personal level. And to me, that is innovation. And we talk about continuous improvement a lot, and, you know, marginal gains, as Mark said, you know, over time, the extra 1%. So as we've grown, as we've brought more people into the business, we've continued to, you know, our innovation comes from the design of that culture. You know, it's not just technology, it's how we connect with our lawyers, how we make them feel engaged, how we bring them along with us. And I think that's something that, you know, is really difficult when you're a firm with thousands of people across many jurisdictions. And that's our next challenge is, you know, we've just opened our first office in Berlin. So we've got to look at, you know, all the things we've learned about building a culture. How do we translate that as we start to grow even further? It always comes back to me for it, you know, innovation around culture and innovation around personal connection.
And that's a really interesting point, because actually I've heard that, you know, some of the bigger firms actually, you know, they've lost some of the draw that they had before, because you've not got those, you know, Gareth nodding, you know, you've not got those big offices, you've not, you know, I've been there, you've not got the nice canteen, you've not got, you know, the gym, you've not got all of that stuff that comes with a bigger firm. And actually that Gareth, I can see you're off mute, you know, how do you keep that culture when you've got a big firm and everyone's in their own rooms? Yeah,
it's tough. There's two things I mentioned from what Laura said there. A really important thing is that because we haven't been used to working in this way, we've seen a massive drop off in our internal collaboration. We track it in terms of time recording, we call it cross-sell. Internal cross-sell has dropped massively this year. And it's because we're not ready for that stuff. And I think that's going to impact what you just talked about, your talent acquisition, our brand, our profile. If people don't talk to each other and they're not used to working this way, then it's probably knocked us back away when others are much more used to it.
Yeah, and I think another thing I'd say that's an opportunity, and that sometimes I think probably overthought by bigger firms, is that you have to invest a lot of money in driving collaboration and things. You know, we've not done it using an extensive budget. You know, when we went into lockdown, we've set up things like working parents WhatsApp groups for people to share tips, advice, moans, whatever it is. We've done lots of internal speed networking on Zoom. We do, you know, hangout times where people can come. There's a theme, there's a topic. You don't have to have a really large budget to do these things. And that's where it is about personal connection. Everybody is a person. And I think that, you know, going right back to what Mark said at the time, I think one of our advantages as a team who's been building Gunnar Cook is that many of us are not from the legal sector. So we've been slightly naive as to how lawyers work. And it allows us to do things that potentially in a big firm you'd be restricted, because people might say you can't do that in a law firm. You know, you can't have speed networking and do these fun themes in a law firm context, and we've not had that.
You didn't do a risk assessment for your WhatsApp group, 100 paid risk assessment. Okay, that's interesting.
And it's funny you say that, because actually the best hire I ever made when I was head of marketing in a law firm was someone who didn't come from the legal sector. Yeah. And she was infuriating, because she would every single, you know, she would continually, that why question mark, continually ask me why. And I really had to force myself to say, well, because you can't in a law firm. So yeah, it's I think, you know, there's a lot to be said for having, again, goes back to that diverse thinking, people who from outside the sector. Mm-hmm. So I am going to ask one last question, then I'm going to bring Emma in, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions from the floor and across panelists. you've grown quite a lot since you started. So you started probably where Lawbox were in terms of, you know, having quicker decisions, etc., and now you're moving to probably having more people that have to be involved in decisions. Have you found it harder to challenge and to innovate as you've grown?
I think for all the reasons that we've already talked about today, as you grow, you've got more people to bring along with you. So, you know, certainly you have to continue to think about communication. I would say this because I'm a marketing person, but I do genuinely believe that communication is you know, the key to this. So we have to definitely engage people with what we're doing and make sure that, you know, we do make decisions quickly. We are lucky in that sense. We're run very entrepreneurially still as a business. But we also have to recognize that, you know, when we were starting out, there were kind of 5 of us in a room, and you can make decisions, and, you know, we've made some really bad mistakes and you can do that. And now, you know, we've got kind of 400 people across the business that are looking to us. So you do start to question, you know, a little bit more, which definitely slows you down. But I think we have to, you know, we have to just still focus on engagement. So I think one of our biggest areas of investment is internal comms. We've just redesigned our intranet to make sure that it's, you know, as useful as possible, you know, providing support to lawyers, whether it's what you call back office support, right through to, you know, connecting them, helping them with resilience, helping them with mindset and things. And I think that to us is the area of investment, and that's the area that's going to hold us together as a firm and allow us to grow from here. I think as well, you know, recruitment of the right people, this won't be for everybody working in this way. So we've worked a lot and refined our recruitment process to test a lot for both a lawyer who's considering going to cook and for ourselves. Is this someone that's going to thrive in this way of working, or is it not? And, you know, we're absolutely fine to say, I don't think this is going to be for you. You know, it's not in anyone's best interests to have people on board that aren't going to kind of thrive and relish in the opportunity. So we've definitely got a bit more selective around our recruitment process. Because we need people that are going to become ambassadors for this way of working, and that are going to go out and help us with innovation and help us growing the brand, help us spreading the message.
That's really, Mark, I'm going to come to you quickly before I go to Emma, because internal comms again is something that I think often gets overlooked with PR and comms, and really refreshing to hear you talking about the internal perspective and the internal communications that so often get overlooked.
Internal is huge. In terms of building a brand, in terms of building engagement, in terms of building anything or differentiation. A lot of businesses, and I think particularly professional services businesses, overlook the fact that your best salespeople, your best business developers, if we don't use the sales word, are your own people. They're your best advocates. Because actually, you know, your brand promise is out there that says this is what we are. If you then ring somebody who is completely not that, then you've already lost. All that expensive marketing spend has been wasted, because the first touch point of the customer, the client with the business is awful. And, you know, ultimately your best advocates are your people and the people that you've helped. And I think businesses a lot of the time overlook the importance of internal comms, and they do so. I think it's at their peril, because I think it's absolutely vital.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to bring Emma in now, who's been sitting there patiently listening to everyone. So, so Emma, welcome. I had some questions. I did say I was going to go off piece. I'm actually going to start with that idea that we've been talking about around budgets and around technology and innovation. And I just want your views on, you know, how legal tech can help firms be disruptive, and whether you think it favours the bigger firms with the bigger budgets.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously that tech has its place, as it does in every aspect of life. But I think the one thing that I'm sure that most firms are obviously aware of this at this stage, but the key thing to me is that whilst technology can help to disrupt or to change and to innovate, I think what I find really interesting is the kind of the new business models and how innovative firms can be with kind of the people, resources that already exist. And I think that if tech is used properly and it is very much aligned with kind of the business objectives and very much kind of driven by what the client needs, then it can be incredibly powerful. But And I feel that actually in the past year or so, legal tech, this kind of amalgam of legal tech and innovation has kind of been accelerated, because we've now in this position where, everybody said that 2020 was this catalyst for change, but I kind of feel like it was way beyond that. We were totally forced to look at the tech that we had and new tech, which we'd never really had to do before. So we've had that kind of acceleration. But I just think it's such an interesting discussion, because I think that, yes, historically, the tech solutions out there, whether it was e-discovery, automation, whatever it might be, they did favor the big firms. And I mean that as much from an implementation perspective as budgetary. And a lot of the smaller firms just are like, we just simply couldn't afford it. But I think that now we've got loads of newer tools which are really effective, they're cost efficient, and it means that smaller firms can actually utilize them, and then in that way actually add value to the client. So it's not just tech for tech's sake.
And you mentioned there's some firms that you are challenging and are ripping up the rule book to go with the theme of the webinar. Which firms are you seeing that are really doing things differently?
I think it's obviously I love what Jamie and Lawbox are doing. I think it's fantastic. But even stuff like Sprint Law in Australia, The Good Lawyer in Canada, I find them really interesting because they're completely new business models. And I think that they've recognized that innovation doesn't need to be, and I think we've really heard that as a theme today, it doesn't need to be, we gravitate to extremes. And I think that that's quite risky. I think that it can be like small things, and actually just listening, which is something that I know you talk a lot about and is really, really important. So I think that any of the firms that embrace diversity, because there is a sense that, diversity is a bit of a tick box exercise, but to me, diversity encompasses different skill sets as much as anything else. And if you have lawyers continually advising lawyers, legal tradition will pervade inevitably. But if you've got places where you've got designers coming in and engineers, and actually the lawyers are sitting back and listening to somebody in the marketing team, properly listening to them and to the designers, and then I think they're innovating, and they're actually going to move away from tradition. And we've got shifts away from the billable hour, and we've got lots of brilliant legal tech vendors and providers, but I think the true innovation has to come from a diversity perspective.
Yeah, and interesting, Laura mentioning there that, not all lawyers, and Jamie is a similar position and not a lawyer. And I know it's something that Mark feels passionate about in terms of getting non-lawyers into the room and what a difference that can make. Now, one of the things I want to ask, and then I want to open up to questions. And Emily, you are right with Budapest, so well done. Still got the other two maps up for grabs though. So you mentioned that 2020 has really forced people to use technology differently, and I think today is a good example. Who would have thought a year ago that we would be doing webinars on Zoom when that technology was open to us, all along? Google Docs, DocuSign, HelloSign, all these things that existed pre 2020, but that firms are now using in different ways. Do you think that's going to help legal tech, or do you think it's going to mean that legal tech industry actually is going to be, because I think lawyers in particular, if there are non-lawyers online, please throw in what happens in your industry, but I think there is a thing that lawyers have to buy legal tech, or they have to buy legal at the beginning. Gareth nodding there. Do you think that this year is going to finally mean that law firms will look beyond something that just happens to have legal at the front and actually explore the whole wide world of technology that's out there?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I kind of wonder whether we will end up have this kind of unique loyalty to certain pieces of technology that we've all used during 2020, whether it's subconscious or otherwise, stuff that really worked that we couldn't kind of do without. And I think that it's really forced people to scrutinize the technology that they have. And I agree with you. I think that there's just this, and I think that's where a bit of cynicism maybe crept in with legal tech, because sometimes you find people going, is that really legal tech, or is it just a piece of technology, or is it an application? And there's lots of fantastic tools and applications that already exist. And I think that, you know, for example, at Surmise, we have a Microsoft Word add-in, but that was kind of on the back of, we didn't really mean to go down that path. You know, it was kind of on the back of last year where firms were saying, but look, you know, we found that actually there's lots of stuff that we've never really utilized within Microsoft Word. And it would be brilliant if actually we could have an integration between Microsoft Word and Surmise. So, I mean, that's just one example, but I think we're seeing more and more lightweight technologies that are being layered on top of existing tools. And I think it's really important because that gives us a sense of cohesion. And ultimately, all we really want, whether you're in law or any other sector, is you want all of the frictions to be removed by using technology. You want a kind of a seamless workflow, or, you know, even as a consumer, you know, with an app, you want stuff to be seamless. And I think that if there is a kind of interoperability, so that you've got the kind of integrations into Teams, Slack, whatever it might be, that I think that there'll probably be consolidation. And I hope anyway, that the cynicism around legal tech is dissipated even further, the more that we start to see all these different kind of applications that are able to speak to each other, essentially.
Gareth, you took yourself off mute, and I'm going to go back to you, because I mean, it has been the case that, you know, the big firms kind of go after the shiny next legal tech thing. Do you think that firms are going to start to look beyond something that's just got legal on the front of it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's some fatigue, though. I do think that. I think you know, digital fatigue. We've heard that term coming more kind of prevalent recently. We had a whole thing of which platform do we use? Zoom, Teams, Blue. You know, that went on. Skype. That went on for about 6 months. And the last couple of pieces of technology we've talked about, I feel like we've heard more. Not another platform. Not, you know. And I'm sure that somewhere in the city and in the, you know, the world, there are lawyers who are still handwriting things and scanning them to secretaries to type up. You know, I'm sure that's still happening today. So there's a whole spectrum of users. But I definitely think in our, you know, senior associate and our kind of fixed share partners or younger partners, that openness, and I have seen more suggestions for products and repurposing products that they use in their personal life to use in their professional life, which is, you know, taking the legal out of legal tech. I think it's the same thing.
And I think, you know, Salesforce for me is a good example of that with CRM. I mean, Salesforce has always been, you know, a leader in CRM systems, but never really entertained by law firms, perhaps because it's got sales in there, which, as Mark said, law firms don't like to use the word sales, but also because wasn't designed for the legal sector. We've got 5 minutes left, so I want to open it up to the people in the audience. Yes, well done, someone. Callie, you have emailed me directly, and you have the 3 cities correct. So you win 1 copy of the book. So well done to you. I'm going to leave some time if someone else wants to either message me directly before the end to give you the right answers. If not, Emily, having helped with Budapest, you can get the second one. But if anyone in the audience has got any questions, or if panelists, you've got any thoughts for other people on the panel, now is the chance. You can either do that in the chat, or if you want to take yourselves off mute and ask the question in person, feel free to do that too. There's always a gap before the first one, but if anyone's got any thoughts or comments.
I was just going to comment on the technology side of things. That we were just touching on. Yes, I totally agree that there are, you know, there are some generic sort of platforms that we can all start to adopt that will improve things for firms. We've you know, we spent a long time going out and testing different systems, different sort of cloud-based practice management software systems, and in the end we decided that a suite of different applications from different non-legal providers really sort of helped. So, you know, we use things like Trello, Harvest for our sort of finance, obviously Xero for our accounts, you know, all these different applications that now integrate. You know, you can find a solution really easily that is really quite cost effective. So it's worth exploring. I think the other thing to note also that on the legal tech side is people often sort of explore legal tech to try and improve the way that they're delivering their service internally. And I think what we've been using Surmise over the past 2 or 3 months now, really happy with it. And I think one of the great things about it is it doesn't just improve the service and our ability to do jobs as legal providers. It also helps the customer, the end, our customers, our clients, to engage with legal services and to understand their contracts better, which I think is, that type of tech for me is really where, the value sits, because it's not just, helping us to do our jobs, it's helping us to communicate better with our clients.
Thanks. And I like that you use the word customer there. That's another discussion around whether we should call them, again, Mark's nodding because we've had this discussion as well, haven't we, Mark?
Yeah, sorry, absolutely. It always amuses me that you're not allowed to call them customers. The idea that people walk down the high street past ordering something on their phone off Amazon as a customer, going into the bank as a customer, going into a shop as a customer, and then suddenly walk through some magic portal in a law firm and become a client. It always amuses me that why you're not allowed. It's ridiculous.
Mark, another Mark, an interesting comment in the chat, which is very interesting discussion. Thank you. I think tech is often easier to change in a large organization than legacy culture. Our whole business model is based on the power of cognitive diversity. So you'll have resonated with the diverse thinking today in a crisis. I suspect it is probably no accident that it is often non-traditional law firms that reach out to us and who we also recommend to clients. The conversation gives me hope for the future. So thanks to that. And Mark, if you want to take yourself on mute and add anything to that, but thanks for that comment.
I'd like to just drop in a comment, if I may.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you to all the panelists as well, because it's been really informative. Thanks, Claire, for putting this together for today. Been really good, and I've agreed with so many different things which I've been messaging privately to the different panelists. Been really interesting. I would also just like to, when you're talking about software, Jamie, there's a great piece of software that I've discovered this last week, and it's part of Toggle. I don't know if you know what Toggle is. It's a time tracking software which I use to track everything that I do during the day. But they brought out a new thing called Toggle Plan, which is a project management software, very similar to Trello, but takes it one step further, which is really nice. So just thought I'd share that with you. But also very interesting to hear about the company culture issue that people seem to be experiencing. And I think that is definitely a conversation that I would love to actually go down further with if you do another one of these, Claire. Company culture is a big thing, and we're wanting in the business magazine in the next edition, we want to actually do a focus piece on 1 year from working from home. So if anybody wants to get involved in that, let me know. And another one is diversity, cultural diversity as well in the workplace, and how that's changing in our business world. But yeah, everybody, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it today. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Alan. I'm going to go to Steve. I know Steve is non-law, so that's great. Steve was at one of the big four, and I know is passionate about culture. So, Steve.
I'm afraid it's not a culture question, Claire, or directly, but what I want to ask is about the ways that interaction with partners to gain knowledge of the market has changed. I think there's been a lot today that's been really useful around client need. There's been a lot about strategy to market, but the only pieces I've heard about partners is how they're dragging their feet. So how are you getting the information that you need to get the right perspective on the market and the partner perspective on the market?
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to answer that question, and then I'm going to throw it over to the panelists, because I know you were a partner, as I said, at one of the big four. So what would your perspective be?
My perspective is that in addition to the well-being, etc., that's being focused on helping partners to communicate, there hasn't been the opportunity for partners to be able to say, this is what's different for me in the market, and this is what I need to be able to do, or we need to be able to do, because we are going to be contributing different things in the way that we go to market because of the uncertainty and everything else that we faced over the last year.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
And I wonder what understanding there is of that perspective.
So who wants to jump in on that one? Mark, you're off mute. Do you want to?
Well, market knowledge is always important, and you should always be digging into what people are seeing in the market. But I hope this doesn't come across as critical, Steve. But one of the things I find fascinating in the legal sector and the professional services sector is the focus on partners. It's the whole organisation. It's everybody in the organisation that will give you. I think my biggest criticism of the professional services sector is the idea that that it only matters. I hear this a lot. What our partners want. What about everybody else? I think everybody else in the organisation has that insight as well. And I think sometimes the people in the organisation who aren't partners are probably more closely connected to their markets. In a lot of firms, they're actually doing the work. They're actually seeing the challenges.
Mark, I couldn't agree more, but the question is around how you're getting that voice.
How firms are getting that voice.
Well, so you've got market, you've got client, you've got firm. How are you getting the firm voice?
That to me comes back to your internal communications. That come back to how you engage with the people in your business. I think marketing is a two-way thing. You can only, as marketeers, especially in law, you're not directly connected with your market as you are with other spheres. There's kind of a block in between you, which is the lawyers or the accountants in your sense. And so I think if you're going to be an agile business, if you're going to adapt to the environment, you can't just presume that what you're seeing out there. You've got to know what people are saying. One of the things I'm always talking to lawyers about at all levels is what they're seeing, what are the new trends, what are clients telling them? Because it goes back to the point I made earlier. You can't know what your clients need if you're not asking your clients what's going out there. It should be something that should be on the lips of every single lawyer, accountant, or whatever every time they speak to a client. How's your market? What you're seeing? And then that should be fed. That should constantly be in the mix. Whoever, partner, associate, whatever other level they are, that should always be in the mix. Intelligence, and I worked at Morrison's in the mid-2000s, show my age, and they called it customer insight. And that's probably something that's been missing from the professional services sector for a while, but it's absolutely vital. If you don't know what your customers or your clients are thinking, how can you possibly adapt your services to it? I think it's a great question.
Yeah, and my sense is it's been harder to do that over the last year.
I think so, because I think, and I think it's a lovely one to end on, because Amir mentioned I'm always banging on about listening and going out to the clients. And I think you're right, Steve, that, partners do have a wealth of knowledge. And I think one of the advantages to being in the office with partners was being able to get that information and to disseminate it, particularly with those partners who weren't that good at disseminating that information. And see you're nodding. So actually thinking about, and I suspect, and I'm conscious of the time because we've run over a little bit, but one of the strengths of a firm like Gunnar Cook and indeed Lawbox that have been built on this model where you share, where you have the internal comms set up, puts them in a really good place to be able to share that intelligence, versus firms where, I am sure this year lots of partners have had lots of conversation, and indeed other levels of businesses will have had lots of conversations with their clients, but perhaps not captured those conversations, and that's a wealth of information that hasn't gone anywhere. So definitely something to tackle for the future. Thank you ever so much, Steve, and thank you to all my panelists. As I said, I'm conscious of the time. I am going to hang on a little bit, so if anyone wants to ask me a question, you can do, but otherwise thank you ever so much to all of my panelists today for taking part. It's been a really interesting conversation, and thanks to Alan. Culture and is that what innovation is might well be the theme for the next one. So thanks ever so much. Callie, thank you very much. You have won a book as one of the two that answered, and Emily who's dropped off. For those that were playing along, Gareth, do you want to tell everyone what your maps are?
Yeah, Budapest, New York and London.
So there you go.
Yeah, that's it.
For those that were playing along. But thanks very much to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much, guys. That was great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys, and all the best.
Amy.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Emma. Sorry you were at the end there, so you ended up shortchanged, but
I know, it was good. And thanks very much for organising.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark. You're on mute. Oh, I need to stop recording. Hang on.